Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Matt Wright. I am a media specialist in the Ag Industry Extension and Training Branch, and will be your host today. Today's webinar is Regulatory Requirements to Export to Mexico. Our presenter today is Alejandro Ruiz. He is a trade commissioner with Agriculture and Agri-food Canada and based at the Canadian Embassy in Mexico City, where he is joining us from today. Alejandro has been a trade commissioner since May 2002. As part of his duties, Alejandro is in charge of monitoring any changes to the Mexican regulatory framework related to agri-food imports, serve as liaison with the Mexican authorities to resolve market access issues affecting Canadian exports, and provide advice to Canadian exporters about compliance with Mexican import regulations, among other things. Alejandro has extensive knowledge and experience in agri-food, international business, Mexican legislation, and customs procedures. So a few notes before I hand things over to Alejandro. If you have any technical issues with WebEx, send me a chat and I will try to sort it out. And the chat box can be found in the drop-down, the control panel that drops down at the top of your screen. There's a little chat box there, so you can send it to me. Also, we encourage participant interaction. So if you have a question, open your chat box again and type your question in, send it to me. And at the end of the presentation, during our Q&A session, I will pose all the questions to the presenter so that all the participants can hear. And we're anticipating about 40 or 45 minutes for this webinar. I will now turn it over to Alejandro.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Well, good morning to everyone. I hope that you are able to hear me well. I will try to speak slowly and clearly so that everybody can hear. Well, as Matthew mentioned, my name is Alejandro Ruiz. I work as Trade Commissioner for Agri-food at the Canadian Embassy in Mexico City. To give you a little bit of context about my role here at the embassy, one of my main duties is to actually provide advice to Canadian exporters interested in the Mexican market about the regulations that need to be fulfilled for importing agri-food products into Mexico. And for this purpose, I monitor on a regular basis any new Mexican regulations or legislation that could have an impact on Canadian agri-food exports. I also have an active role on advocacy for the resolution of market access and trade policy issues affecting Canadian products in the market. The presentation that I'm going to give you today is related precisely to market access and regulations for agri-food products coming into Mexico. And during the presentation, I will cover aspects such as basic factors that you should consider when exporting to Mexico, which are the Mexican government departments involved in the regulation of imports. We will look at some of the labeling aspects and regulations in Mexico, the border clearance process, and shipping samples, among other aspects. So that's the introduction, and now I would like to start with the actual presentation. Please let me know if you have any issues hearing well, or I believe there's going to be also a question and answer period at the end. Okay, so starting with the first slide, this slide shows you some context about the trade that Canada has with Mexico. As you can see in the slide, Canadian agri-food exports to Mexico have almost tripled over the last 10 years, from 2003 to 2013. And you can see here how they went from around $700 million in 2003 to almost $2 billion last year. This is a very substantial growth. and it's expected to continue growing thanks to the NAFTA, which actually turned 20 years on 2014 of its implementation. And of course, Mexico's growing food demand is also expected to help trade to continue increasing. Also, one aspect that I would like to note is that the Canada-Mexico agri-food trade is complementary. This is a win-win relation because while Canada produces grain, soilseeds, and genetics that are required by the Mexican industry, Mexico exports and produces all year round fruits and vegetables that are demanded in Canada and that cover the seasonal demand in Canada. So we can say it is a complementary trade. As we are going to see in this next slide, here are some of the main agri-food products that Canada exports to Mexico. These are numbers for 2013 and are based on the Mexican official import stats. So we have different groups of products that Canada exports to this market, starting with meat. We have products like beef and pork, as you can see here, which have a substantial weight in the total Canadian export to Mexico. Then another group of products that are important are grains and oilseeds. So as you can see here, we have canola seed with $800 million last year, very substantial. We have wheat with over $300 million, lentils, we have canary seed, we have pulses like beans as well, which have a very active participation in the Canadian exports. Now, as far as ingredients, there is also some products that are actively exported from Canada. And in this area, we can talk about canola meal and oil. We can talk about skim milk powder and malt. And there is also some processed food products that are actively exported, such as frozen French fries, as we can see here, chocolate, waffles, which was particularly high last year with $29 million, and pet food. So this is just to give you an idea of the broad variety of Canadian products that are exported to Mexico and which are growing as well, because Mexico is demanding for new products, and Mexicans have a positive perception about Canadian products, which are considered to be safe and to have a high quality. Now I'm going to proceed with the next slide. Okay, to give you some information about the market access conditions for Canadian agri-food products in Mexico. First of all, I would like to mention that under NAFTA, most Canadian agri-food products have already duty-free access to Mexico. However, there are some exemptions, such as poultry, eggs, dairy, and sugar. These products were actually excluded from tariff preferences under NAFTA. However, some of these products can actually be exported to Mexico with preferential tariffs under tariff rate quotas that Mexico has in place at the World Trade Organization, the WTO. So in general, we can say that the preferential access that Canada has to Mexico under NAFTA provides an advantage to Canadian exporters vis-a-vis other competitors in these markets that actually do not benefit from this same treatment. And here we are talking about countries like New Zealand, Australia, Brazil, and Argentina, to name a few. So as we saw in the trade stats, NAFTA has been an advantage that Canada has been using and continues to use to access the Mexican market. Now, in terms of sanitary issues, we can say that most of the sanitary issues related to BSE that were affecting in the past Canadian exports of beef products to Mexico have already been overcome. However, there are still some products that are pending access, such as beef from animals over 30 months of age to Mexico. In this regard, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and its Mexican counterpart have been actively working towards resuming total trade in beef products in the near future. CFIA is also working to resume access for Canadian raw poultry meat, which is currently banned in Mexico due to sanitary aspects. Nevertheless, right now, I would like to note that Canadian cooked poultry products can now be exported to Mexico, and the access for the raw dog meat and raw foie gras is under negotiation. There's also some cases where, for example, if there is a Canadian product that have never been exported to Mexico in the past, this may require the development of appropriate sanitary import requirements for the importation of this product into Mexico. This process involves the development of a risk assessment by the Mexican authorities, and in those cases, the CFIA works very closely with their Mexican counterpart, which is called Senacica, as we are going to see in the following slide, and the embassy gives support during all this process. Very well. Going to the next slide, I would like to talk a little bit about some recent challenges for Canadian pulses and special crops in Mexico, just so that you are aware in case that you are interested in shipping these products to the market. In terms of cannery seed, Mexico has a zero-tolerance policy for the presence of quarantine wheat seeds in shipments of cannery seed. Because of this, at this moment, any shipments of Canadian cannery seed that are exported to Mexico have to be certified as free of quarantine wheat seeds at origin. Mexico's current policy is that shipments found without wheat seeds during the inspection process at the border are allowed entry into Mexico without any restriction. However, in the case of identification of wheat seeds during the inspection process at the border, if Mexico founds a maximum of 15 wheat seeds per kilogram when they are tested at the point of entry, they would allow the shipment to be recleaned at destination. And if Mexico founds over 15 quarantine wheat seeds in the 1 kilogram sample that they take, then the product is rejected. So it's important to keep this protocol in mind in case you are shipping this product to Mexico. And also, I would like to note that the Canadian and the Mexican authorities are working on a new pilot program for exports of Canadian cannery seed to Mexico, which is planned to be implemented in 2015. So just that you are aware about this and keep this in mind. Also, I would like to bring to your attention some issues related to detection of soil in shipments of Canadian pulses, such as dry beans and lentils, that are shipped to Mexico, which have actually caused some delays at the border over the last few months. Freedom of soil in shipments of grains and pulses is a Mexican requirement and is also the import policy applied by other countries such as Canada. However, the Mexican authorities have a protocol in place that allows for the fumigation or cleaning of products that are found to contain soil during border inspections. This is a protocol that we have been told is working right now for the importers. However, we strongly suggest Canadian exporters to ensure that their shipments to Mexico are actually free of soil to avoid any delays at the border. Mexico is also analyzing the possibility of requiring that products shipped in bags to Mexico come in pallets. Okay, this is a potential new requirement that could come up in the future. So it's very important for exporters to be in close communication with their Mexican importers to check if there is any proposed changes to the import requirements that would require the use of pallets when shipping product in bags. We are following up on this issue as well here in Mexico with Senacica, the Mexican authorities, and we report constantly about any changes of this type. Very well. Following with the next slide, I would now like to give you an overview of which are the Mexican government departments involved in the regulation of agri-food imports. This is just for you to familiarize with these government departments during the process of shipping to Mexico. On the first place, on the left upper hand, we have the Animal and Plant Health, Food Safety, and Food Quality National Service. The acronym in Spanish is Senacica. This agency, which depends from the Mexican Ministry of Agriculture, regulates imports of plants, animals, and derived products because their mandate is to protect Mexico's animal and plant health. So, this agency regulates imports of products like grains, seeds, meat products, fish products, seafood, etc. Senacica establishes the specific sanitary import requirements for each of the products that I just mentioned. And if these requirements do not exist, as I mentioned before, Senacica would then have to conduct a risk assessment to determine the applicable import requirements. Now, on the second place, we have the Federal Commission for the Protection Against Sanitary Risks. The acronym in Spanish is COFEPRIS. This agency depends from the Mexican Ministry of Health, and it is responsible for protecting Mexico's public health. COFEPRIS regulates imports of fish, seafood, and natural health care products, such as supplements and vitamins. Imports of these products require a sanitary import permit from COFEPRIS, which the importer needs to obtain by presenting certain paperwork. In addition, COFEPRIS also regulates the health and nutritional claims that are placed in the labels or promotional materials for food and beverages that are sold in Mexico. Now, in the third place, we have the Mexican Ministry of Economy. Again, in the left side, this ministry is responsible for labeling regulations for prepackaged foods and beverages, and they also manage the tariff rate quotas that Mexico has in place under the World Trade Organization and other agreements. Lastly, we have Mexican customs. Customs or aduanas, which would be the acronym in Spanish, is the authority in charge of supervising and controlling the entrance of goods into Mexico. They are responsible for collecting any taxes or import duties and overseeing the border clearance process of goods shipped into Mexico. Now, the legal framework for imports of agri-food products is composed of several official documents such as laws, regulations, and Mexican official standards. All of this legal framework is what establishes the actual sanitary import requirements for products coming into Mexico. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about some recent developments and regulatory improvements that the Mexican authorities have implemented to facilitate imports. One of these improvements is called the Ventanilla Única. The Ventanilla Única is a digital single window portal that allows access to filing electronic documentation with the Mexican government for any international trade transactions. So under this portal, Mexican customs can receive electronically the paperwork and information of products that are going to be imported into Mexico. Nevertheless, I would like to remind you that the original documents will still be required when the shipment arrives to the border for clearance purposes. This system has been mandatory in Mexico as of June 1st, 2012, and basically, as I mentioned, it allows for the electronic transmission of documents for complying with the import regulations. This has been positive because as the documents are usually sent in advance electronically, if there is any mistake or omission in the document, it can actually be fixed before the shipment arrives to the border. And this could avoid delays and rejection of a shipment. So this has been working well, and it's one of the advantages of this new Ventanilla Única system. Now, another improvement that Mexico has made to facilitate imports is the implementation of actual online modules where any user can actually consult by themselves which are the applicable sanitary requirements for the animal, plant, or fish products that they want to import into Mexico. They can do this online instead of going directly to the Senacica offices to ask for these import requirements, as it was done in the past, which required more time and effort. Senacica is also participating in the Ventanilla Única system that I just explained, with the purpose of expediting the import process for animal, plant, and fish products into Mexico. So as I just mentioned, if there is any corrections required to the paperwork, this electronic system allows for these corrections to be made before the shipment actually arrives to the border. And that helps in avoiding delays and rejections at the border. Very well. Now, I would like to present to you a slide about the border clearance process so that you are familiarized with it. As you can see, the diagram shows how the border clearance process works, starting, of course, with the Canadian exporter, that will prepare the shipment and all the proper documentation to be sent to Mexico, firstly through the Ventanilla Única electronically, and secondly, in original when the shipment arrives to the border. Some of these documents that have to be prepared are listed here and include the commercial invoice, which, by the way, must be translated in Spanish, a NAFTA certificate of origin, which is the document that it's going to allow you to get the preferential access that Canada has under NAFTA into Mexico. Any sanitary export certificates from the CFIA, okay, required for your specific product, a packing list, and a bill of lading, which is usually issued by the transportation company. So it is very important, and as a recommendation, that you ensure that all your documentation is properly filled out and that the information actually matches with the actual product and what the label of the package says. This is very important to avoid any delays at the border. As you can see here, the Canadian exporter would send the information to the Mexican importer, and then the importer will work with his Mexican customs broker, who acts on behalf of the importer to complete the border clearance process. The official timeline to complete this process is 72 hours, as we can see here. Sometimes it may take longer in those cases where there are issues or mistakes detected in the paperwork or another matter that requires further consultation. But in general, the 72 hours is the timeline established for the border clearance process. So the customs broker will check the accuracy of the product and the paperwork, and he will prepare a document that is called pedimento. This pedimento will contain all the information of the product that is going to be imported, and he will also submit electronically to Mexican customs the pedimento and all the relevant paperwork through the Ventanilla Única system. Mexican authorities will receive the request and the paperwork, and then if everything is in order, they will proceed with the inspection of the actual shipment. In the case of animal and plant products that are regulated by SENASICA, this will require an inspection by the SENASICA inspectors at the border. Usually, as part of these inspections, they take some samples of the product and they review the paperwork and the labels and the condition of the actual product. So once this is completed, then they continue to kind of a red light, green light system, which is activated whenever a shipment wants to cross into Mexico. And if the light, this light operates under a random process. If the light turns red, then the product would have to be unloaded completely for inspection at a yard by Mexican customs. If the light turns green and the preliminary inspection went well as the paperwork, then the shipment can continue its importation into Mexico. In general, we can say that the border clearance is not that complicated as long as the product is in good condition and the labels and the paperwork is in order and comply with all the applicable requirements. Therefore, we advise you to please work closely with your importers to ensure that everything is in order before sending your shipments to Mexico. Okay, now I would like to talk to you a little bit about labeling regulations for agri-food products sold in Mexico. In terms of labeling, there is a Mexican official standard, which I talked to you about before. which is NOM 51, which establishes the labeling conditions for prepackaged food and non-alcoholic beverages for retail sale in Mexico. And in this slide, what I try to do is to put you an example of a label that complies with NOM 51, which is the one that you can see on the left side of the screen. NOM 51 will require certain information that has to be in Spanish, and it's mandatory data that must appear in the label. This information is the product name and description, the list of ingredients, the nutritional information of the product, any preservation legend, expiration date, and lot number, the country of origin, the net content, and the information of the exporter and the importer. All of this has to appear in Spanish in the label. It's important to note that NOM 51 allows for the package to have a label in English or any other language, as long as this specific data in Spanish appears also in the label. Also, I would like to mention that there are verification units authorized by the Mexican government that are able to certify that the labels of prepackaged foods and non-alcoholic beverages comply with this NOM 51, as well as any other labeling standards. These units are very useful to ensure that the labels of the products actually comply with the applicable Mexican regulations and avoid potential problems with the import process. So it's very recommendable that whenever you ship products for the first time, that you get the service of one of these authorized verification units for the labels of your products. Now, I also have in this slide, in the right hand at the bottom, an example of a different label. This label is for grains and pulses that are exported in bulk to Mexico, let's say in big bags. In this case, because the product is not going to be directly sold to the consumer or for retail sale, then the label just have to contain certain information such as name and variety of the product, the net content, the country of origin, the identification of the lot, and the information of the exporter and the importer. And it's a very simple label that has to be placed in the bags and does not have to comply with the whole labeling requirements under NOM 51, because the product is not going to be sold directly to the consumer. It's going to be exported, let's say, to a wholesale market or central de abastos, where it would be repacked in smaller bags, which then would be sold to the Mexican consumer. Very well. Now, I would like to bring to your attention as well some new nutritional labeling rules that were announced recently by the Mexican authorities, and specifically by COFEPRIS, the Federal Commission for the Protection Against Sanitary Risk, which we already saw. And this relates to the nutritional labeling of prepackaged foods and non-alcoholic beverages. As you may know, there is an issue in Mexico with obesity, diabetes, and Mexican authorities have been trying to fight this issue, which is a public health concern, by encouraging Mexican consumers to eat healthier products and to be more conscious about the food products they consume. So this is exactly the rationale and purpose of this new nutritional labeling rules. Under these new rules, the front of the packages of food products where the name and the brand of the product appears, like the example that I present in the slide, will be required to include some predefined icons, as you can see here, stating the amount of energy, saturated fats, other fats, and sugar that are included in the product. This information will have to be expressed in calories and also as percentages of the daily intake of the product. A few products are exempted from these new labeling provisions, such as herbs, spices, coffee, and vinegar, among others. As you can see here in the slide, an example of the current label, how it looks right now for a given product. This is actually this is a beef product, and the new label including the icons with the specific information that I just mentioned related to energy, fats, and sugar. Also, the new rules establish the possibility of using a nutritional quality seal, provided that calories, the sugar, the fats, and the sodium that are included in the product are under pre-established maximum parameters. The objective of this seal, which you can see at the bottom at the example I provided in the slide, is to actually provide further information to consumers to facilitate their purchase decisions and avoid health risks. The use of this seal is voluntary, and those interested in making use of it will require a previous approval from the Mexican authorities. Now, talking about the efforts by the Mexican authorities to fight obesity and other health problems in Mexico, there is another measure that Mexico introduced recently to induce healthier eating habits. And this is the imposition on January 1st, 2014, of new taxes on high-calorie food products to discourage consumption of what the Mexican government considers as non-healthy products. So, as part of these taxes, they include a tax of 1 Mexican peso per liter on the sale price of flavored beverages with added sugar. We're talking about soft drinks, powders, syrups, etc. Also, a tax of 8% on the sale price of certain non-basic foods with high caloric values. This is products that have over 275 calories per 100 grams, such as snacks, chocolates, ice creams, custards, puddings, fried food, pastry, milk sweets, and cereal-based food, among others. So it's important that you keep this in mind in case that you're intending to ship any of these products to Mexico. Also, I would like to mention briefly that Mexico has recently established some domestic regulations related to organic foods. And this includes an organic certification seal that can be used for compliant products. The seal is actually presented here in the slide. Currently, the Mexican legislation for organics considers the possibility of establishing equivalency agreements with trading partners. In this regard, I would like you to know that Canada and Mexico are in the process of working out an equivalency agreement on organics. But in the meantime, please keep in mind that Mexico accepts Canadian organic products that are certified by internationally recognized certification organizations. So you are able to ship any organic products to Mexico as long as they are certified by internationally recognized organizations. Very well. Continuing with the presentation, now I would like to make reference to shipping samples to Mexico. This is a question that we commonly get from exporters as to how they should prepare and to ship their samples whenever there is interest from a Mexican buyer. So one general rule for you to keep in mind is that shipping samples is basically subject to the same types of regulations as shipping commercial loads. There are going to be certain exemptions, but in general, it's the same process. So first of all, samples must be accompanied by an invoice showing that the products have no commercial value and that they're only intended for promotion purposes. That's the first thing to consider. The product also needs to be marked as a sample. It can be marked or labeled in the outside of the box with the word sample in large letters. In addition, samples must be accompanied by a certificate of origin to demonstrate that the product is originally from Canada, in this case. And the person that is going to import the samples into Mexico needs to request for any relevant permits from the Mexican government agencies that we saw before. The authorities may require that the samples actually be accompanied by a sanitary certificate issued by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So you have to be prepared to obtain this certificate in case it is required. Now, because the samples are precisely that and not to be used for commercial purposes, they do not have to comply with the labeling regulations that we just saw. In this case, the person that is going to import the samples just needs to notify the authorities that the products are samples and that they are not to be sold directly to Mexican consumers, and therefore they would not need to comply with the labeling regulations. There is a specific harmonized system code for importing samples, which is mentioned here in the slide. And also, you need to evaluate very well which is the courier company that you are going to use for shipping samples, because some courier companies cannot carry out any formalities for the customs clearance of the samples when they arrive to Mexico. So the advice here is that you better work with someone in Mexico that has experience in bringing the samples so that you avoid any problems at the time when the samples arrive to Mexico. And of course, here at the embassy, we can help you, if you like, to give you contacts that could help you with this process. Okay, we're almost getting to the end of the presentation, and I would like to give you a summary of some basic tips that, if you follow them closely, you can actually help to reduce any significant risk when products are shipped to Mexico. First of all, you need to choose a Mexican importer that has experience with the product that is going to be shipped, and also that is officially registered in the Mexican importers roster, which is called the Padrón de Importadores. Only Mexican importers that are registered can actually import products. If they don't have this registration, they cannot bring any products into Mexico. Now, one frequent mistake that we have seen causing problems at the border is the actual misclassification of products. So it's very important that you know the specific harmonized system code for your products that are going to be shipped to Mexico. You also need to ensure that the paperwork and labels of the product comply with the Mexican regulations, as we saw before. This is very important. Send a copy of the paperwork in advance of shipment. Now with the Ventanilla Única system, the paperwork can be sent electronically, and then this allows to make any corrections if required before sending the original paperwork with the actual shipment. This also is very important. You should verify that the point of entry you're going to be using is approved for the product that you want to ship, and be conscious about cultural differences, because definitely it's very different to do business in Mexico than in other countries. Relationships here are very important. Businessmen in Mexico tend to do friends first before going down to business. So it's very important to establish this relationship with your importer. Okay, well, finally, I would like to remind you that we are resources for you. We are here to help you in the process of shipping to Mexico. So in this slide, I present you the Agri-food team that we have here at the embassy, starting with our Agri-food counselor and head of the unit, Mrs. Kim O'Neill. We also have Francis Lindsay, which is our technical counselor from the CFIA here at the embassy. We have Melanie Bernard, Trade Commissioner in charge of market development, and you have myself as well. And we as a team can provide you several services, which are mentioned here, like advice on Mexican import regulations, support in cases when shipments are retained at the border, support on market access issues, market potential assessments for your products, and advice on business opportunities, and provide you key contacts in the market. Also, we have a team in other relevant cities like Guadalajara and Monterrey, where our colleagues Juan Carlos Muñoz and José Antonio Rivas can help you as well if you are interested in selling your products to those regions. So please keep in mind these contacts. Let us know if you have any questions, doubts about the Mexican import requirements. We are here to help you, so please contact us for any assistance. So I would like to finish by saying that really shipping to Mexico may sound complicated, but it's not, as long as you follow the rules and you make sure to comply with the Mexican import requirements with the assistance of your resources like the embassy, with your Mexican importer. Very important to keep close contact with him to avoid that there are any issues or problems with your shipments. So I hope that this presentation was useful for you. I'm available for any questions that you may have, and also please feel free to contact me afterwards by email or give me a call in case you have further questions. So thank you very, very much for your attention, and hopefully we can see your product soon in the Mexican market. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alejandro. And we do have a few questions for you. The first one is, can a company use a sticker on the front of the package to comply with the new nutritional labeling, or does it have to be integrated in the actual package?
That's an excellent question. Well, as far as we know, a sticker would be allowed to be used as long as the icons that I presented appear on this sticker. However, the Mexican authorities are still working out the details on how this is going to be implemented. Okay, so we have been in contact with them, and they told us they are still in the process of determining exactly how it's going to be implemented. This is coming into effect on the second semester of 2015. So my recommendation is that you are monitoring this closely, and we will, of course, be in close contact with the authorities and will be reporting on how exactly this will have to be complied with. But it's something to keep in mind and be monitoring very closely.
Okay, thanks. And our next question is, our international HS code for our product is different from the HS code given by our importer. What should we do?
Yes, well, by international standards, the HS codes must be the same up to 6 digits. Up to 6 digits, they must be the same. After that, every country can add more digits to break down the different products according to their needs. So my recommendation here is that you use the HS code that the Mexican customs broker tells you to use, because the Mexican customs broker is the one that is going to conduct all the border clearance process with the Mexican authorities. So the one that they tell you to use is the one that you should use, and you must check this with your Mexican importer, because as I mentioned in my presentation, the customs broker works on behalf of the Mexican importer. So make sure you use the HS code that the Mexican customs broker is telling you to use.
Okay, thanks. We have one more question.
Sure.
What happens if Mexico does not have sanitary import requirements in place for the products that I want to export?
Okay. If that happens, then as I mentioned in the presentation, it will be necessary to conduct a risk assessment for that specific product. This risk assessment is carried out by the Mexican sanitary authorities, SENACICA in this case. So to start that process, first of all, the exporter will have to notify the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the CFIA, that they want to ship this product to Mexico, which does not have sanitary import requirements in place. Then CFIA would have to notify Mexican authorities about this interest and provide any information that Mexico would need to develop the risk assessment. Once the risk assessment is developed, then the Mexican authorities will be able to identify and establish the applicable sanitary import requirements for the product. During this whole process, the embassy is there to help you, and we ask that you please let us know if you face one of these cases so that we can facilitate this process and so that the Mexican authorities can establish the import requirements as soon as possible.
Great, and we actually did get another question in. So it says, Nutriponics Canada is an ag technology company. Is there opportunities to present Alberta ag technology to potential joint venture partners through your office?
Yes, of course. Actually, Mexico is always very keen on new technologies for the food industry, and certainly if you want to present any agriculture technologies, we can put you in contact with potential customers. And in this particular aspect, I would like to mention that my colleague Juan Carlos Muñoz in the consulate in Guadalajara is actually the lead on equipment, for example, and my colleague Jose Antonio Rivas at the consulate in Monterrey is also the lead in technologies. So we can certainly help you as a team to identify which could be the best prospect for the type of technology you would like to present to Mexico. But I can tell you that usually Mexico is very open for finding new technologies that could help them in their productivity and in the food industry in general.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and it is, Flaxseed is actually a very healthy food. However, it's high in calories. So, does the high-calorie tax of 8% come into effect?
Yes, I didn't get the first part of the question, Matt. Sorry.
Oh, that's
Flaxseed, you said?
Yeah, it says flaxseed is actually a very healthy food. However, it is high in calories. So this person is wondering if the high-calorie tax of 8% comes into effect.
Well, according to what the Mexican law says, it says that any product having 275 calories per 100 grams on it would have to pay for the new tax. So it's going to be important to see if this particular product surpasses that range or not in order to determine if it would be subject or not to the tax. But this is how the law is spelled out. Over 275 calories per 100 grams, the tax would apply on the product.
Yeah, they say that there's 633 per 100 grams.
233, you said?
No, 633.
633 per 100 grams.
Yes.
Well, that would certainly surpass the level. But my suggestion would be if this person could please contact me afterwards, we can actually do a consultation for them with the Mexican authorities just to double check if this product would actually be subject to the new tax or not. Because I know obviously this is a very well-known healthy product, so we just want to make sure that if the tax would apply or not. So my suggestion is if this person could please contact me afterwards to make this consultation with the authorities directly.
Okay, great. And now quickly, I'd like to introduce Paola Zaragoza. She is a Trade and Relations Officer in the International Relations and Marketing branch of ARD and has some more information about upcoming projects her division is working on. Hi, Paola.
Again, thank you very much, Alejandro, for your very valuable presentation. And then just to expand on the services that are available for Alberta companies, we have the International Relations and Marketing team within the Ministry of Agriculture. I am responsible to do market development activities in the Mexican market. So we, as well as advance Alberta agricultural interest in terms of getting more market access for products in specific international markets, in this case in Mexico. So we work very closely with the Canadian Embassy in Mexico, as well as the Consulate in Monterrey and Guadalajara, to collaborate on a number of initiatives in order to foster trade. So this includes facilitating buyers and seller connections, such as one-on-one meetings around trade shows, exhibition, or tabletop showcases, as well as sharing market and competitive intelligence gathered through primary and secondary sources based on your interest and export plans, as well as identifying market opportunities and troubleshooting. For example, if a company is having issues clearing their products through international customers, or identifying regulations that impact product exports. So there are resources available here in Alberta as well, and again, we work in collaboration with our federal counterparts to advance trade to Mexico. So for any other questions, again, we try to streamline communication as well with the embassy and the consulate, but if you have any questions as far as any upcoming initiatives, please feel free to give me a call back. My phone number is 780-638-3831. And upcoming initiatives in Mexico, we are planning a food ingredients mission to Mexico, focusing on the processing industry in the market for human and animal consumption. And on the value-added side, we're also going to have a presence at the largest trade show in Mexico focused on retail, that is Expo ANTAD in March. So feel free to contact me directly to obtain more information about these initiatives and how to participate. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. That wraps up today's webinar. Big thank you to Alejandro for joining us from all the way in Mexico City, and thanks, Paula, for putting this on. And thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us today and logging in. I hope you all have a great day.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much to all of you. Have a great day.